And welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. In diplomacy, like in life, it's not about the cards you're dealt, but how you play the hand. India has got a raw deal in Afghanistan. It bet on a government that collapsed. It allied with a country that fled in the dead of night. It invested on the future of people who are now ruled by the Taliban. India has evacuated its diplomatic missions. For the longest time, New Delhi batted for an Afghan-led resolution and backed a legitimate government in Kabul. But today, India declared that it's also talking with the Taliban. The meeting happened in Doha. It was most likely not the first one, but the first one to be officially acknowledged, hence the significance. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll discuss India's strategy, India's options in a Taliban-ruled Afghanistan. Also the concerns. We'll also show you what day one of the Taliban's complete control looks like, celebrations and fireworks on the streets of Kabul by the Taliban, the takeover of the Kabul airport, and efforts at government formation. We'll discuss all of this. Also on the show tonight, the Taliban, as I said, have taken over the Kabul airport with their special force Badri 313 in control. WION Malik takes you inside the airport for a ground report. Their biggest challenge/priority is to get recognition. Which governments are ready to oblige? A special report on which country stands where on engaging with the Taliban and recognizing them. No prizes for guessing Pakistan's position on this. It is reaping what it sowed. An unprecedented wave of Afghan refugees is flooding Pakistan. You could say it's their return gift for destabilizing the country. Meanwhile, the pandemic is not over. South Africa has detected a new variant, C12. It's being called the most mutated variant. We'll tell you all about it. We begin, as always, with Gravitas Global Headlines.
The Indian envoy in Doha met Taliban leader Sher Mohammad Abbas Stenekzai at the Embassy of India in Doha. The early return of Indian nationals stranded in Afghanistan was a key focus. The Indian envoy made it clear that Afghanistan's soil should not be used for anti-India activities and terrorism in any manner. As American troops ended their mission in Afghanistan, US President Joe Biden issued a statement urging the Taliban to respect the commitments on safe passage of those wanting to leave the country, now that they are in control of the Kabul airport. The UN Security Council has adopted a resolution asking the Taliban to honor their commitment to let people freely leave Afghanistan. However, it failed to include a safe zone mentioned by French President Emmanuel Macron. Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz has met Palestine President Mahmoud Abbas. A Palestine official said that the talks with Gantz included all aspects of the relationship between the two sides, including the security and economic situation in the West Bank and Gaza. The UN's Environment Programme has said leaded petrol has been eliminated globally after the last remaining stocks were used up last month.
This international success story comes after a 20-year public-private initiative led by the United Nations Environment Programme.
The UN spearheaded a 19-year campaign to end the use of poisonous fuel that poses major health and environment risks. Residents and tourists near Lake Tahoe fled as a fierce 2-week-old wildfire roared closer to the popular resort destination. Evacuations in and around the town of South Lake Tahoe came as the U.S. Forest Service said it was closing all 18 national forests in California to the public. Hurricane Ida triggered floods, sparked power outages and damaged houses, emerging as one of the most powerful storms to hit the U.S. Gulf Coast. The hurricane ravaged 4 states, with the maximum impact in Louisiana. Europe's largest active volcano, Mount Etna, erupted once again, spewing lava and sending plumes of ash into the Sicilian sky. There was no impact on the operations of the nearby Catania International Airport.
The Taliban have a saying, the Americans are the watchers, but we have the time. And this has kept them going for years, 20 years in fact. 20 years after they were thrown out of power, the Taliban have been proven right. The Americans stuck to their watches, their deadlines, their timelines. They left Afghanistan well before the deadline expired. The Taliban are now in complete control. This is how they celebrated last night. Bullets were fired in the air. What do you expect from a terror group? They express everything with guns, it seems. Celebration with guns, TV interviews with guns. This is what they did. There were fireworks too. The Taliban celebrated on the streets of Kabul today after the Americans declared their complete exit late last night. This was the moment when the Taliban entered the airport. They walked across the runway to mark their victory, to underline who was in charge now. Look at these images carefully. And this was confirmation of America's surrender and retreat, the moment when the last American soldier boarded the final flight out of the Kabul airport. Remember this picture, it's going into history books. It marks the fall of a superpower. So the Americans are out, the transition is complete. The Taliban now have complete power. But are they in control? Well, that's another question altogether. Their first priority is gaining international recognition. They're reaching out to governments. They're even inviting foreign investors. That's what they said in their press conference today. Foreign investors are assured that their money will be safe in Afghanistan. It sounds preposterous. It's also tragic. The Taliban are now a reality that cannot be wished away. The world is coming to terms with this. What about India? For weeks, we've been reporting on India's engagement with the Taliban. New Delhi never confirmed any of it, but today they've made their talks official. They've made it public. The Indian ambassador to Qatar met with the head of the Taliban's political office, Tanikzai. New Delhi released a statement. It said the meeting happened at the Indian embassy in Doha and that the Taliban had requested this meeting. What does one make of the shift? It's hardly a surprise, frankly. In recent months, there have been enough telltale signs that a back channel was active. Then why is today's meeting a big deal? Because for the first time, India has acknowledged publicly that it is indeed talking with the Taliban. New Delhi has used this opportunity to convey what it expects from a Taliban regime. Two clear takeaways. Number one, India will not tolerate the Taliban support to terrorist groups, which implies that they aren't one themselves. But India is talking about the terrorists who target the country. The Indian diplomat told Taliban representatives that Afghanistan should not be used for anti-India activities. Number two, evacuation. They discussed the safety, security and early return of stranded Indian nationals. Now, it's safe to presume that India asked the Taliban to allow the safe return of Indians from Afghanistan. Discussions, we're told, were also held over Afghan nationals who wished to travel to India. What was the Taliban's response? Apparently, a word of assurance on India's concerns. A word of assurance from a terrorist group now forming a government. Well, stranger things have happened in politics. As for this engagement, it's been in the making for many months. In September 2020, India decided to participate in the intra-Afghan peace talks in Doha. A senior diplomat was sent to attend the meeting in person. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar joined via video link. Representatives from the Taliban were also present in these talks. For the first time, we saw high-ranking Indian officials sharing the stage with the Taliban in their official capacity. And in June this year, Minister Jaishankar visited Doha not once but twice. His engagements there coincided with reports that Indian officials have been engaging with the Taliban, like this one. A British newspaper reported that Indian officials have raised concerns over the Taliban's relationship with Pakistan. They asked them not to, quote-unquote, support anti-India elements. Back then, the Taliban is said to have told India that Pakistan remains a very important country for the Afghans. They also objected to New Delhi's support to the democratically elected Afghan government. India never confirmed any of this. But India did not deny this either. while Minister Jaishankar continued to visit those countries that are frequented by the Taliban. In July, he went to Tehran, just when Iran was hosting an intra-Afghan dialogue between the Taliban and officials from the then Afghan government. Nothing came out of that dialogue. In the weeks that followed, the Taliban began an offensive to take Afghanistan. Now they have succeeded, and they're looking for recognition from India. But remember, they've also said that Pakistan is like a second home to them. India at best will only be another neighbor, one with whom they have a difficult history. Recently, the Taliban also said that they want cultural, economic, political and trade ties with India. What about India? What does India want? Do talks and terror now go hand in hand? Are Taliban the good terrorists now? Are they the 2.0 version? What about their loyalty to Pakistan and the terror threat that their rise poses to Kashmir? There are no easy answers to these questions. It's a diplomatic tightrope that New Delhi must walk, or should we say, has been walking for a while now. Here's another question. What becomes of the Kabul airport now that the US has left? The Taliban say their so-called elite force, the Badri 313, will be in charge of the airport. And you must know this. This force derives its name from the historic Battle of Badr, the one mentioned in the Quran. This was when an army of 300 soldiers defeated their enemies, who were in the thousands. So a small force defeating a very big one. The Taliban seem to have a penchant for symbolism. But do they have the expertise to run an airport? They lack skilled staff to take care of logistics. Say they manage to build an efficient team, what's the guarantee this airport will be a safe zone? And most importantly, what happens to Afghans? Will they still be allowed to take flights out of Kabul? Our next report has some details.
Welcome to the Kabul International Airport. The atmosphere here is of triumph and victory. What you see are not Western troops. These are the Taliban's elite Badri 313 guards. They're patrolling the runway, posing for pictures, and brandishing US-made M16 rifles. Across the runway on the military side of the facility are hundreds of American aircraft. Partly dismantled and the tires deflated. They lie like a symbol of America's chaotic withdrawal. Inside the airport's hangar, Badri 313 guards could be seen examining the iconic Chinook helicopters. American troops had dismantled their systems before leaving. Can the Taliban repair them? We decided to find out.
I'm standing inside a hangar that has Chinook helicopters, the same Chinook helicopters that were given by the US to the Afghan Air Force and the Afghan army. They've been damaged to the point beyond repair. But the Taliban engineers here say that they would be able to repair them.
Overseeing the entire operation was Taliban leader Anas Haqqani, the brother of Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is the deputy leader of the Taliban and the chief of the Haqqani network. We asked him what exactly the Taliban plans to do with the American war chest. Here's what he told us.
دا خو موږ لوی هدف چې شل کاله د دې لپاره سپیشلي مبارزه وشوه هغه د اشغال خاتمه وه او دلته د خپلو افغانانو د مسلمانانو نظام راتګ و هغه هدف حاصل شو الحمدلله اوس به د دې لپاره کار کوو دا نظام په پښو ودرېږي دلته موږ خپل عقیدې تحفظ وکړو موږ د خپل ملت خدمت وکړو دا ډېره خوشحالۍ ورځ دی او تاریخي ورځ.
The Pentagon may be telling Americans that the aircraft left behind are inoperable. But the Taliban's confidence about fixing them tells a different story. What about the airport? Who will run it? What state is the airport in? In one word, terrible. After 2 weeks of chaos, most of the critical infrastructure has been degraded or destroyed, as have the passenger halls and air traffic control terminals. they will have to be replaced for commercial flights to run again. But will commercial flights run again? Will refugees be allowed to leave? The Taliban say they will keep the airport open for civilians. That they will allow Afghans with passports and visas to leave if they want to. And leave in a dignified manner with peace of mind. That's the promise. The fear is that Taliban guards will stop those who worked with the collapsed government. Next question. Who will look after the airport security? Until now, the airport was under American control. The Americans were managing evacuations along with contingents from other NATO countries. Turkey had offered to run security after the withdrawal. But the Taliban refused any foreign military presence. Now they say only the Badri 313 will look after the airport security. But what about logistics? Who will take care of them? In recent weeks, civilian personnel from NATO countries were taking care of air traffic control, fuel supplies and communications. Now that they've left, controlling logistics is going to be quite a task. Thousands of skilled workers have fled Afghanistan. Reports say there aren't enough trained workers left to run the logistics. It will perhaps take weeks, perhaps months, before the Taliban can put together a team. And even then, there's no guarantee that the airport will be a safe zone. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
So you saw the new guardians at the Kabul airport, the Taliban Special Force Badri 313. Do you know who trains them? The dreaded Haqqani network. They are in charge of security across Kabul. You'll find Haqqani's men at checkposts outside government offices. Our correspondent Anas Malik met one of the top Haqqani leaders at the Kabul airport. His name is Anas Haqqani, the youngest son of the group's founder, Jalaluddin Haqqani, the brother of Sirajuddin Haqqani. Here's a full interaction.
Anas Malik, we met in Doha last time. He can translate in Dari as well. It's okay. You can speak. Yeah, my translator will do it.
Oh,
Tum translate kar dena. Anas, thank you so much for taking out and speaking to us. How does it feel now, the fact that so he will translate. Tum bata do. Usko bata do कि वो तुम translate कर दोगे. Should I ask?
Okay.
Yeah. How does it feel? Today is the 31st of August. The deadline has ended. The occupation has also ended. Foreign forces have left. So what is your take on the matter?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. دا خو موږ لوی هدف چې شل کاله د دې لپاره سپیشالي مبارزه وشوه هغه د اشغال خاتمه و او دلته د خپل افغانانو د مسلمانانو نظام راتګ و هغه هدف حاصل شو الحمدلله. اوس به د دې لپاره کار کوي د نظام په خو درېږي دلته موږ خپل عقیده تحفظ وکړو موږ د خپل ملت خدمت وکړو د ډېر خوشاله ورځ دی او تاریخي ورځ ده.
There are some helicopters and we see planes that have been left behind which are not in the condition, in the utmost ideal condition. So would you be discarding them or would you be getting them sorted and getting them in use?
دا اصل کې د بیت المال او د ملت برخه و دي هغوی د خدمت لپاره ده خو امریکایان او د هغوی سره چې کوم په اخر کې د سپاریه کې دوی روزل شوي قواوې دا په اخر ورځ دلته میدان کې جمع شول دوی قصدن دغه تخریب کړي دي او دا موږ نه لرو کوو دا کوم تخنیکی ستونزې کوم مشکلات وي هغه موږ ان شاء الله بیرته فعالو په هغه کې به ان شاء الله موږ منظم پلان لرو نو هغه لپاره به ان شاء الله دا بیا بیرته د ملت او د ولس په خدمت کې دی هغوی د خوالي په خاطر دی هغوی د خوبۍ په خاطر
Last question before I let you go. You've been holding meetings with a lot of political leaders as well. Now that the foreign forces have left, how soon are we looking at the government formation now?
هغه ناستې په دې خاطر هم دل چې کابل ته د موږ د راتګ نه مخکې ځینې نور خلک د طالب په نامه چې موږ مخکې نه ونتلي امر د مشرتابه لخوا نه ورشوی ځینې بدو خلکو سوء استفاده کړې دلته داخل شوي ډېر خلکو ته مشکلات جوړ کړي وو ډېر خلک لوټلي وو غلاوې کړي وې نو دې په خاطر موږ په اقدام وکړو چې زر راشي د هغوی امنیتي ترتیب ونیسو تدابیر ورته ونیسو کسان ورته د دوی کوم ستونزې لري نور هغه دوران تېر شوی دی د جنګ او د مشکلاتو دلته نور د وطن کې ژوند کوو ان شاء الله د دې لپاره اوس کومه ستونزه نشته مشرتابه عامه عفو کړې ده د عام عفو نه څوک ښه استفاده کوي ښه ژوند کوي د نظام سره همکاري کوي هغې دپاره ټولې دروازې خلاصې دي موږ ورته غېږه خلاصه ده او څوک چې د عفو نه وروسته هم سوء استفاده کوي هغې سره بیا قانوني برخورد کېږي او په راتلونکي ورځ کې به دوی سره هم انشاءالله په نظام برخه کېدی شي هم مشران د هغوی نه همکاري وغواړي یا دوی سره هم په ځینو شیانو کې هماهنګي جوړه شي دا ټول د دې وطن بچیان دي دلته به ګډ ژوند کوو دې ته ضرورت نشته چې څوک د وطن نه لاړ شي او وطن پرېږدي
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Stage 1 of the Taliban's plan is complete. Expel foreign countries. Stage 2 is convincing those same foreign countries to recognize them. It's not an easy job. The first Taliban regime had little success with it. They sent envoys to world capitals. They dispatched officials to the United Nations. None of it worked. Only 3 nations recognized the Taliban: Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. 3 countries. This time, they've come with a plan. Tall promises and diplomatic flattery. Will the world fall for it? Well, it depends on 3 factors. Number 1, will the Taliban allow safe passage for foreign citizens and their allies? It's an early test of their promises. Number 2, what will the government rather look like? Will it be inclusive? And will women be guaranteed equal rights and freedoms? Number 3, the Taliban's commitment to battling terror, making sure the Al-Qaeda and ISIS Khorasan do not use Afghanistan as a staging ground. These 3 things are what the world will look for. And let's face it, number 2 and 3 look very unlikely. Equality for women and crackdown on terror. But some countries don't really care. They can't wait to recognize the new rulers. And topping this list is Pakistan. Their double game has paid off. 20 years of covert support can now become official. The indications are already there. Trade between Afghanistan and Pakistan has increased 50%. This is despite multiple disruptions and border shutdowns. Then you have Shah Mahmood Qureshi doubling up as the Taliban's foreign minister. He has one message for anyone he meets. Please talk to the Taliban, he says. Same with China. They were preparing for a Taliban takeover. All the infrastructure deals and loans are ready and printed. All they need is the Taliban's signature. China was always betting against the Afghan government. So why are they delaying the recognition? Well, here's what a Chinese spokesman said. It is a customary international practice that the recognition of a government comes after its formation. So China is playing on a technicality. Wait for a government before recognizing it. It's a question of when, not if. These are 2 solid Taliban partners, China and Pakistan. The rest of the world is circumspect. Some more than others, the likes of Russia and Iran, they're engaging with the Taliban. But they are in no hurry to recognize them. President Vladimir Putin is taking the measure of the Taliban. His concerns are not democracy or women's rights for that matter. His concern is security. Order in Afghanistan means peace in Central Asia. That's all that Putin wants. A top Russian official has ruled out military ties with the Taliban. Clearly, Moscow sees this from a security angle only, not as a trade opportunity or an alliance. Iran is quite the opposite. They see security benefits. They also see a chance to make some money. Supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has said that Iran would back Afghans irrespective of who is in power. Now, traditionally, these are rival groups because Iran is a Shia country, remember. The Taliban are Sunni. But they can unite behind a common enemy, the Western powers led by the United States. Plus, it's a new market for Iranian oil. The Taliban do not care about US sanctions. They started buying Iranian oil 2 weeks back. It's a win-win for both sides. Much needed oil for Afghanistan and for Iran, a hungry buyer right next door. It works well. These countries have reasons to recognize the Taliban, either money or security or deep state politics. What about Western countries? They don't share borders, but they share the responsibility for this mess. The United States says they're in no rush. They will wait for the Taliban's actions, not their words. The White House says that all American allies are on the same page. They will not hurry to recognize the Taliban.
I think it should be really clear here. There's no rush to recognition of any sort by the United States or any international partners we have talked to.
But here's the problem. The West recognizes the terror threat in Afghanistan. They need the Taliban to fight the ISIS Khorasan. So the question is, does recognition really matter? Would the Taliban prefer a US embassy or US funding? Would they want a seat at UNESCO or unlimited aid? It's a no-brainer. You cannot talk to the Taliban, seek their help in the battlefield, and then say, we don't recognize them. As long as money and weapons flow, the Taliban will not mind. Then why are they sweet-talking the world? Probably for optics. Diplomatic recognition fits well with Taliban 2.0. Zooming into New York for the United Nations or a joint meeting at Brussels works very well. For leaders who lived in the wilderness for 20 years, recognition is important, especially in the Islamic world. Turkey and Qatar are already close to the Taliban. They are in talks to run the Kabul airport. The rest of them are waiting for the US, the likes of Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Their decision will depend on which way Joe Biden goes, which brings us to the difficult question: who will stand up to the Taliban? Right now it seems like nobody will. The West is worried about terrorism. The neighbors are worried about security. The only ones who can mess up this status quo are the Taliban themselves. And things are going in that direction. We are seeing public executions, trials without evidence, strict laws for women, and revenge attacks on Western allies. If this continues, the world will lose patience, and hopefully it won't be too late. So global recognition is their priority number one. What else do the Taliban want? Running a country is not the same as raining bombs. Their Islamic emirate has all the makings of a failed state already, even before they've begun. The economy is in a mess. There are rival terrorist groups in action in Afghanistan, and those in charge have no experience of governance. Our next report tells you all about the Taliban's growing challenges.
Winning a war is one thing. Running a country, quite another. Are the Taliban up to the task? They walked into Kabul and took control without a fight. But the bigger battle has just begun. How will they run a country of 38 million people? The Taliban have inherited a broken state. Afghanistan's economy is in a shambles. Afghans are running out of cash. They can't withdraw more than $200 in a week, or around 15,000 Indian rupees. You would think that should be enough. Not if you're at the Kabul airport, where last week one bottle of water was priced at $40 and one plate of rice was being sold for $100. Outside the airport, things are hardly better. Prices of essentials have shot up by at least 35%. From flour to cooking oil and fuel, everything is expensive. The financial system has collapsed. When Kabul fell, Afghanistan's currency, Haqqani, dropped to a record low. Afghanistan's cash reserves, worth over $9 billion, are locked away in the US Federal Reserves. There is no international assistance. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund have halted aid. Afghans are struggling to make ends meet. The only industry that's still thriving is that of terrorism. Multiple terror groups have risen to the surface. They all want to share in the Afghan power pie. Groups like the Islamic State Khorasan, Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, and Eastern Turkish Islamic Movement have all had links with the Taliban. But now they may challenge the Taliban's authority. Do the Taliban have the wherewithal to bring all terrorists under one umbrella and ensure order? It's a tall ask. The Taliban is struggling to break away from its existing terror affiliations. They have promised to break ties with Al-Qaeda and the Haqqani network. But criminals and terrorists are making their way into leadership roles in government. One of the names in the running is Khalil Haqqani, a senior leader of the Haqqani network. Khalil Haqqani is blacklisted by the United Nations and the United States. Reports say he is set to emerge as one of the most powerful men in Afghanistan's future leadership council. So far, the Taliban has dealt with its problems with guns. Now, it faces an economic meltdown, a challenge from rival terror groups, and the pressure to deliver on governance. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Pakistan helped create the Taliban. Pakistan provided weapons to the Taliban. Pakistan brought the Taliban to power. When their regime collapsed, Pakistan provided them a safe haven. Now the Taliban are back in power, and here's their return gift to Pakistan. Refugees. An unprecedented number of refugees. They're entering Pakistan by the thousands. Some are coming through border crossings. Others are being smuggled into Pakistan. There are a total of 2.6 million registered Afghan refugees globally. Out of these, 1.4 million refugees are in Pakistan alone. That's more than half of the global tally. And this, like I said, is just the registered figure. There are tens of thousands of undocumented Afghans living in Pakistan. Thousands more are on their way, and Pakistan is worried. On the 7th of August, Pakistan shut its doors to Afghan refugees. It vowed to not let any more Afghans enter. After Kabul fell, the borders were opened partially. Selected refugees are now being allowed to cross under international pressure. Where are they entering from? There are 5 major border crossings between Pakistan and Afghanistan: the Khyber Pass, Torkham, Ghulam Khan and Angur Adda. Pakistan has shut these 4. The 5th one is the Spin Boldak border crossing. It's the only one that's still open, but the situation there is worse than what it was at the Kabul airport a few days back. Look at these images. Thousands of refugees remain stranded at Spin Boldak, crammed like a herd of animals, waiting for their turn to cross. And Pakistan is making them wait for days, hoping they'll eventually give up and return home. Those who are being allowed to enter are not being allowed to go far from the border. They have no food, no clothes, no shelter. They remain stranded near the border at a 10-foot deep trench separated by barbed wire.
I have come from Afghanistan. We and our children are homeless. The situation was bad because of the war. We have neither land nor employment here. We have come here and sat at the houses of our loved ones. Now we are forced to beg by the roadside. It is difficult for children to get 2 meals a day. We pray to God.
Pakistan's disregard for human dignity is appalling. Its self-delusion even worse. Look at the headline on your screen. Pakistan's Interior Minister Sheikh Rashid says that not a single Afghan has been granted refugee status till now, and neither does Islamabad plan to do so in the future. Why? Because Pakistan fears that terrorists may try to enter their country in the garb of refugees. That's rich from a country whose biggest export is terrorism. The fact is, Pakistan doesn't have the appetite to accommodate more refugees. It doesn't have the resources or the money to keep them. It played blood games in Afghanistan. It armed the Taliban, brought them to power, legitimized their rule. How could karma not hit back? But for many in Pakistan, the realization still hasn't kicked in. They're singing praises of the Taliban, unfurling their flags, chanting their slogans, telling the world how good they are. On the list of the Taliban's admirers have been cricketers like Shahid Afridi and wannabe politicians like Shahid Afridi. At a recent press conference, Shahid Afridi said the Taliban should be accepted because they have come with a very positive mind. You have to listen to this.
तालिबान आए हैं इस वक्त और बड़े पॉजिटिव फिल्म ऑफ माइंड के साथ आए हैं। ये चीज़ हमें पहले नजर नहीं है और माशाल्लाह ये चीज़ें बड़ी ज़बरदस्त पॉजिटिविटी की तरफ चीज़ें नजर आ रही हैं कि लेडीज़ को काम करने की इजाज़त, पॉलिटिक्स में बाकी जॉब्स की तरफ उनको मतलब इजाज़त है। एंड देन क्रिकेट को सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं। क्रिकेट सीरीज हो जाती है लेकिन श्रीलंका में पूरी की सिचुएशन ठीक नहीं थी, इसलिए वजह से सीरीज नहीं हुई। मैं समझता हूँ कि तालिबान क्रिकेट को बहुत ज़्यादा पसंद है।
He spoke as if it was a post-match press conference. And did you hear what he said at the end? I believe the Taliban love cricket. We didn't know that was a criterion to accept them. And if it is, we dare Shahid Afridi to pull off his most famous trick with the Taliban, tampering cricket balls. It would be interesting to see the punishment the Taliban would mete out for such foul play. Guess who wouldn't be worried about any of these problems? The refugee crisis, the tumbling currency, none of it will bother the United States because after 20 long years, they have withdrawn from Afghanistan, or should I say, stumbled out of Afghanistan. 4 American presidents have led this war, 4 presidents. All of them failed spectacularly. George Bush for 7 years, Barack Obama for 8 years, Donald Trump for 4 years, and Joe Biden just 6 months. Yet Biden's failures have overshadowed those of his predecessors. It tells you how badly he messed up. All the media pampering, all the Twitter love has ended. Biden is an embattled president already, a clueless commander-in-chief, and it shows in his approval ratings. Let me show you the latest poll numbers. These were recorded between the 27th and 30th of August. 51% of the respondents disapproved of Biden's Afghan strategy. 38% approved. There's more. 20% adults in America blamed Biden for the Afghan debacle. Only 10% blamed George Bush, 9% blamed Donald Trump. Remember when Biden said, "The buck stops with me"? Well, America agrees, it seems. This is an indictment of Joe Biden's policy, his indifference to Afghan lives, his failure to plan for contingencies. Joe Biden was supposed to be the global candidate for president, the man who would rejuvenate American resolve. Instead, the US looks tired and disinterested. And make no mistake, the world sees this weakness. Take the US-UK relationship. It's called the backbone of transatlantic ties. But Britain is having second thoughts. This is what UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said last week, and I'm quoting, "We would not have wished to leave in this way." He was talking about the messy withdrawal from Afghanistan. And we all know who planned this withdrawal. Joe Biden. Lawmakers across the West are blasting his strategy. They come from all parties, all ideologies. Some of them are future world leaders. Listen to some of them.
President Biden said this week that his only vital national interest in Afghanistan was to prevent a terrorist attack. Even if that is the case, both he and President Trump should be deeply ashamed. And I say this with great sadness because their actions have returned Afghanistan to the very government that harboured the 9/11 bombers.
It is clear that this commitment by the international community has not been successful. This is the biggest debacle that NATO has seen since its foundation, and it is an epochal change that we are facing.
These are powerful leaders of the West. Armin Laschet is poised to be Germany's next chancellor. He's called the Afghan pullout the biggest debacle in NATO history. Clearly, Biden's stock is tanking, but he's hoping that this period of criticism will pass. Wrong again. Trust is cultivated over years. But it takes just one decision to lose it. And Joe Biden just did not fail Afghanistan. He failed his allies too. The West pressed America to extend their deadline, to stay beyond the 31st of August. Joe Biden said no. The result was this. Many coalition allies and citizens are still stranded in Kabul. Why would anyone trust America after this blunder? This is a country that runs away from allies, from responsibilities, and from victims of their own war. What we need is strong leadership, whether on climate change or tackling China or all the issues that he claims to espouse. Unfortunately, the US is not that leader anymore, not under Joe Biden. Being better than China just won't cut it. The world needs stronger commitments from a country that claims to be the global leader. Take Taiwan, for instance, a country that lives in permanent fear of Chinese invasion. Until now, they banked on American support, but the scenes in Afghanistan must have frightened the Chinese leadership, the Taiwanese leadership rather. What if they are next? Chinese state media is compounding these fears, warning Taiwan that America will abandon them. Same with climate change. Joe Biden promised a 50% cut in American emissions. Why should anyone trust him? 20 years back, George Bush made a promise too. Democracy, prosperity, freedoms for the Afghan people. Look at where things stand right now. Afghanistan was not just a military defeat, it was a defeat of American prestige, a defeat of America's preeminence. And all credit goes to President Biden. His blunders have done what China could not with years of propaganda. Topple Pax Americana. It's been a while since we discussed the Wuhan virus, and the news, I'm afraid, is not good. South African scientists have detected yet another variant of the virus, one that could be deadlier than the Delta variant. They're calling it C12. So far, the prevalence of this variant is relatively low, but scientists are worried the mutations it contains could evolve and become concerning. Here's all you need to know about the C12 variant.
18 months into the pandemic, and the Wuhan virus is yet to disappear. If anything, it's getting even deadlier.
The reason we were worried about...
In South Africa, scientists have discovered yet another variant of the virus. They have named it C12. They claim this variant could be as severe as the Delta variant, perhaps even worse. The revelation was made in a review paper published by South African scientists. They issued an alert asking health authorities to prepare in advance, claiming that this virus has been detected in all provinces of the country. Has the WHO paid heed to this warning? Not yet. The World Health Organization is yet to list this variant as an interest of concern. Why? Because it doesn't fit the criteria to qualify for this category. Then why has South Africa issued an alert? Because of the particular mutations the C12 contains. According to virology expert Dr. Megan Steen, C12 contains quite a few key mutations that we see in other variants that have gone on to become variants of interest or concern. If the mutations do turn out to be concerning, will the existing vaccines be effective in combating them? There's no guarantee. Scientists say that based on our understanding of the mutations in this variant, we suspect that it might be able to partially evade the immune response. But, despite this, that vaccines will still offer high levels of protection against hospitalization and death. So, how worried should we be? So far, the prevalence of this variant is still low, and there's a fat chance that it may eventually die out, as have many variants before. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching. Poppy.
Ja, mit dem Rücken zur Kamera, das fand ich besonders.
Das ist schön, immerhin, Paul.